Welcome into this sacred space of three spiritual besties. Grab a seat and join us for raw and unfiltered conscious conversations.
Thank you for tuning in to Conscious Conversations with your hosts, Ashley.
Nicole.
And Brittany.
And today's episode is about protections. And again, with this episode, there's a lot of different aspects of this. So we'll go through a lot of different layers of what protections are, what you can utilize for them, how to ensure you are protected, as well as many other various topics within our time together today. I do want to start off by stating a huge aspect of this podcast is that it's divinely protected. Within this space, in this sacred space, we set the intention that this podcast has the space for us to get really vulnerable in, share really amazing spiritual topics with you all while also simultaneously being protected. And how that kind of looks is based in intention, protection from how negative opinions might affect our energy based on what we share, or protections from, you can call it like evil eye or different things of that sort. So the interesting thing with protections is you can indicate them, state them, intend them, but what's the energetic fuel behind them? So I think it'd be a good place for us to start where what do you guys feel is your energetic substance, intention, or fuel behind your personal protections or even the protections of the podcast? So my personal fuel for my spiritual journey when I first started protections was that I started experiencing a lot of negativity really fast because interestingly enough, a lot of my spiritual journey has had eyes on it. I shared it from the get-go on TikTok with a lot of people. There's been a lot of opinions. That made it severely confusing to me. And it was hard to figure out what was my intuition, what was my knowledge, and what was other people's opinions. Did I like that opinion? Was that opinion mine? And I truly started off in a place of like, let me research some protective crystals. So I got my obsidian, I got my tourmaline, I got my labradorite. I wore labradorite for years straight, never taking it off until it told me it was tired and needed to be retired. And I lost it and I could not find it forever until eventually I found it again. But in that process, it was about me knowing that I'm protected and infusing that in my aura. That's a huge thing for me, having protection in my aura. And I'm not willing to specifically share with you guys what I have just for sake of the protections. But I will say it's good to base your auric protections on where you know your aura is going. Do you want your protections to be based in quantum energy, in energy of spirit protection? So a lot of my protections are based in where I'm consistently going. And a good idea for that is I went through crystals that I resonated with, elements that I resonated with, beings that I resonated with, and I collaborated with them and said, you know what? Energetic protections would be beneficial for me to have in these different kinds of spaces.
Perfect. You actually brought something up for me. So one of the things that you mentioned was for sake of keeping the protections and working is that you don't overshare your protections, even with your closest friends. So amongst us three, we can sit here and speak about what we do or what we know, what we come across. But there are so many layers when you're doing protections. I really like to think of it within layers because that's what you need. So when I spoke previously about how I use cleansings, protections is part of that. So it's a multi-layered thing that I like to do. So I'll cleanse, remove whatever energies I don't like or whatever I find unnecessary in my space. Then if I find that there's something really icky, typically what I'll do is run to Ash and I'll be like, Ash, help. No, I do though. I do sometimes. So I find a trusted friend or a trusted energy worker that I know can help me in these things. I have a couple friends. I have Ash, I have my good friend Ryan, I have my good friend Abella, who they kind of guide me along these types of things. And then what I'll do is I'll banish whatever energy does not belong, tell it to get the hell out. Eat it into the astral. I'll send it off to the demons if they feel like they want to assist me in that, or my energetic team. Sometimes I'll actually use the dragons with the guidance of Ash. And then I will also, a lot of the times actually, I prefer to use the dragons. Just because I feel like it's like a specialty of theirs. So, and Ash actually does a really cool cleanse with that, with the dragons, if they offer it at the time. So I'll do the cleanse, and then what I'll do is I'll do the protections. So, I'll go in and I'll set up layers to that protection. And what I do, because I have a terrible, terrible, terrible memory, as my co-hosts know, or have experienced in these last few months, um, I'll write it down so I know. So I know that what I've done for the protections, and then what I'll do is I'll set up a ward. So a ward is just like a little lock and seal on your protection. And so what it does is if something energetically comes in that does not belong, you can see it's a physical way of knowing if something is energetically attacking you. So you can ask whatever it is. So I'll use plants because I use plants a lot as wards, as just like I'll pay attention to them and I'll set the intention. If there's somebody that is directing negative attention towards my business, please grow mold. And then I always ask permission of that plant if they want to be offered as, or if they'll offer themselves to me as a ward, because it's really, really essential to get the permission of anything that you use energetically, whether it's a plant, whether it's a person, whether it's an animal. And I'll set it up like that. So grow mold if somebody is attacking my business, or have the leaves start turning brown or die off if somebody's trying to attack my physical or my astral self. So something like that, that's more I guess physically tangible, because I'm all about that. It really helps me visually. So I'll write those things down. I gave let's say my rose bush. I asked my rose bush to be protector of my left toe. And you know what I mean? So something like that, to where you can, if you notice anything and you're checking your words, which is part of your spiritual hygiene we hate that word, that you should be maintaining, you'll notice the fluctuations within your actual physical wards. Another thing that you can do is setting up your spiritual wards. So I will go to my light body and I will set up almost like a shield of whatever it is at the time. Of recent, I was using different now I'm like, see, you don't tell all your protections, but I'll give this one. I really enjoy a mirror protection around my light body, because typically what people will do when they're jealous of you, it's a projection of their insecurities. And so I like to make people look at themselves when they are projecting any kind of negativity towards me, things like that. So I really set up the intentions of kind of allowing people, the main thing that I like to do in my productions is allow people to reflect upon why they're sending that energy towards me, where it's coming from. And typically it's all a reflection of self. So then they turn inward, and it kind of, what I've noticed and I've actually witnessed myself, is people that I've set up specific wards with, I have noticed a change in their attitude towards me. And even when they're speaking to me, they'll say things. And that's another thing that you can do. You can set up certain words as wards. So when you hear them, your little receptors go off and you're like, okay, always mundane over magic. So they could have just been having a conversation with you and mentioned the word. But if it's something like, oh, I was out yesterday and the foxtail, which is like such it's a word that's not common. A foxtail brushed against my leg, and you're like, what? Like, that's a word I have set up as a ward to know that people are trying to blah 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 me or whatever. Those things will come up, and they'll be like warning signs for you to kind of tune in and see what's going on. So as you're doing those kinds of things, they have to be something that cannot be mistaken as a mundane occurrence. You know what I mean? So just be really specific in what your intention is. So if I see a purple rubber duck, it means that Ash is sending me the evil eye, which she wouldn't do. She doesn't have time for that shit. So set up those things, write them down so you know, and then give yourself time to discern what that is. So again, if it's something like a foxtail, you run across a foxtail, it's not something that's common, your team will do their job to send you another one. And then now it's time to really focus in on what you're doing. Then you're going to go through the process of cleansing, banishing, protecting, putting those protections back up. So warding is a huge way of that I like to protect.
So listening to you guys talk about what you do, it makes me makes me really feel like I do like such bare minimal stuff, even when it comes to like the cleansing. But again, it's what works for you, and there's different levels for each person, and given your activity and where you go and who you're interacting with and things of that nature. I really thought that it was interesting, Brittany, how you brought up like wards and how you can like tell if something's happening because you can see it with the ward. And that's something I definitely want to start implementing even for myself as like a ping, like setting up with my team a specific signal for me to know that if I need to check in with my protections or increase them, or something's gotten through my protections and now I need to cleanse. Because sometimes when you're just going through your day-to-day life, you don't even think about the things that are happening and that you can't see. Um, so for me, as far as like protections go, my big thing is speaking. I will speak my protections out loud. Um, and I also just kind of have my own energetic setup around me that has evolved over time. Like what I was doing last year is not the same thing I'm doing now. Like it's okay to change your protections as you're going and learning, and what I was doing a year ago wasn't wrong. It just is different from what I'm doing now. One of the big things that I learned when I was going through my shamanic classes was a way of protection called Waracocha. And this is actually something that you can even share with other people. So I've done it like with my son or with my husband. But basically, you imagine like a golden ball of light above your head, and you pull that golden light down and you wrap it around yourself, kind of like a shawl in a sense. So you pull it down and you wrap it around like a hood, and you can wrap it around others, and it stays with them for up to 4 hours. And this is something like if I'm going to a concert, I will always do this because it's just a lot of energy, it's a lot of people, and it just makes me feel better. If I knew that I was going to be going when I was doing my markets and doing readings for people, I would put it on. And it's something that's simple, easy. It almost looks like you're stretching. So if you feel uncomfortable doing these practices out in the open, it's something that seems very nonchalant in a way.
I love that you bring that up about that shamanic practice because when I heard you describing that, Nicole, I was like, oh, I think that feels like a veil to me. And then when you
Mhm.
said it lasts, temporarily, I was like, that would be, well, I would label in my practice a veil. And that is some form of protection that I utilize frequently. If you ever get a reading from me, I have a veil on my head that is a physical veil. It's a head wrap dress thing. I'm not sure, headband. We'll call it a headband. That I will share. I put crystals on. I cleanse it. I put certain crystals on to infuse the protection. Then I put the mantra over and I call in my beings over it. So I do have it's kind of like a external tool form of protection that I guess Brittany would probably call that a ward. Or maybe not. I'm not too sure. I'm new to the ward thing as well, so I'm not too sure, but it's like an external version protection of what I'm trying to do intentionally in that time. So in my veils, I allow certain things through because we may need to know about it. If I'm reading you and you have a negative energy coming in, I'm going to need to know that. But I'm protected while knowing it, but I'm able to still sense it, but in a protective way, in a way that's buffered. And I will wear veils at hospitals, in places that I feel are high spiritual activity, because I personally don't want to have a mediumship connection. Other people may. Personally, for me, it doesn't resonate for me. So veils are a big part of my protection, and I kind of think of them similarly as how Nicole was explaining, like a cloak. It's like a cloak that you just have over you on a temporary basis. And I also think a cool aspect of these cloaks is they can do different things at different times. If you want to be able to still sense with certain part of your abilities, you're able to do that within the veil. If you want everything totally turned off, you're able to do that in the veil. And it's not permanency, which is the most important aspect of these veils.
Now, speaking a little bit more about wards, because they are permanent things, you can, in my opinion, should not ever use a person or an animal for a ward, because essentially it's your first line of defense. So something's hitting your ward, so negative energy comes in, it attacks whatever your ward is. If it's a plant, and the plant has a short life, and you know that the plant has a short life, then they live their life serving you, and it's kind of a nice energetic exchange between the two. You don't ever want to set up your dog as a ward. You don't want to be like, hey Ash, you're going to be my ward. That stuff's going to go straight to her. Nicole, guess what? You're now my ward. Like, you don't do those kinds of things. So be really mindful and be really careful. Like, if you don't want to be that person, or you don't want to be that thing that's receiving these energetic hits, then maybe find something different. You can use something like rocks, because those are really, really good for transmuting energy. The way you would ask that rock, like if something hits this energy, like change the color of the rock, or have a crack in it, or grow molds or moss around it. Something that isn't so far out there. Like, you can't be like, hey rock, if you want to be my, or can you be a ward of people who have evil eye towards me, and then I want you to turn purple. Like, rocks don't naturally turn purple unless it's a purple rock. So be really like intentional with what you're doing here. If you have a nice tree in your yard that's a sturdy tree, and you want you want to go ask your tree to help you with energetic attacks, you'll notice maybe some leaves falling off a little bit sooner, or you'll notice maybe it's just feeling a little bit sickly energetically. So be really mindful when you're doing those kinds of things, to not just willy-nilly assign things as wards, because ethically, if it's not right, don't do it. You really have to have a strong sense of your ethical outlook on things when you're doing these kinds of things. A lot of people don't, and it kind of gives what we do a bad rap, right? When they're going around slinging curses and and hexes at everybody, every which way they choose to, right? So when you're doing these things, just be really mindful and careful, and have a lot of respect for the energies that you're calling upon, asking assistance from, whether it's a plant spirit or an angel, whatever it is. Be very, very, very respectful with moving forward with these kinds of things, because the more love and good vibes you're sending to them, they're going to want to keep you going in that way too. So
Brittany, you made me think really heavily on when I first started my spiritual practice and my protections were good, and I saw the attacks go to those around me that I really care about. So that's something that I do want to bring up, that I also see in my sessions. So I have a personal connection to it, and I see it very often in my sessions where I'll work with someone and there's a lot of evil eye going towards them. Their aura looks good, but their dog has been throwing up or has been sick. And that's something to kind of know or note, that if in your protections you have like I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever bounces off of me, sticks to you, whatever. If it's bouncing off, where's it going? Are you alchemizing it? Is it going back to that person? Intend that it doesn't go to any of your loved ones or anything that's going to still affect you. And that's a big part of your protections. If your protections are so good, but then your dog, your partners aren't, depending on what's coming your way. Now, not all things are of that capacity, but depending on what's coming your way, it could ripple to those people around you as well. So it's just something to be mindful about.
absolutely. So I want to just really quick, you talked about alchemizing that energy. What, for those of us who are in a newer practice, talk to me what alchemizing means in a way that's people can understand.
I personally want Nicole to answer this.
Okay. She's the alchemist of this group. So give it to us, sis.
Alchemy is taking something and changing it into something else. So for my team, or like I had used an example in another episode, is, if I go to Earth and I ask Earth to take the denseness that I'm dealing with, or whatever it may be, I always ask then for it to be alchemized or transmuted into something better or something more aligned. So that would kind of be my definition of what it means to alchemize something. So if you're getting attacks, right? You can say they can come, but I want them to be alchemized and transmuted into success, into abundance, into love, into gratitude, into whatever it is that you want. Because sometimes it can be exhausting thinking, like, I didn't put up my protections today to send it somewhere else. Just set up So it's automatically changed and transmuted into the thing that you want it to be. So if somebody says something negative to you, you can receive it, but you'll receive it in a way that's beneficial for you.
Perfect.
And it's so important to note that that can be done for your businesses. I had to really heavily go through and protect me as Ashley, yes, my aura, but my business is as Ashlight Star's energetic signature. I do have a social media platform where there's a lot of, again, opinions and eyes. And at first, I was just return to sender, return to sender, return to sender. And eventually, the dragons was like, use that, honey, use that for success. And I'm like, show me. And then they showed me alchemy, and they showed me how, for me, my can I share this? Let me just double check I can share this. We'll take a live moment of me double checking with my team and my own discernment. They said I can. Okay. So for me and for many of you, your solar plexus is what's going to do that alchemy for you. Your solar plexus is what is oftentimes taking in dense negative energy, alchemizing it, and then sending it somewhere. So your solar plexus is what to tell or who to tell, or kind of depends on how you view your light body. If you view it as like a living thing, who, what, where, when to tell. Your solar plexus is where to start with that alchemy. I would personally suggest, and to then also, if it's the business, the energetic signature, just putting like a veil or another protection thing over that, which what just popped in my mind that I don't know much about. And Brittany, I would kind of ask you to share a bit about, if you don't mind, is sigil protection.
Yeah. Setting up your chakras to be a line of protection is such a good way of protections as well. So let me give you an example. We talked about alchemy. We talked about using those chakras as protections, right? So I actually got this idea from Ash and a reading that I got from her, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful way of me. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. It helps me every time, but it also helps me mentally, right? Mundane over magic. You're going to hear me say it all the time. Mentally, when my head starts to kind of spin and I'm having a lot of self-doubt, what I've done is I've set up a protection in my heart space. The protection in my heart space looks like a water wheel. Anytime I'm having self-doubt, I like to take and I like to set the intention of transmuting that self-doubt in my heart space and it going through that and then just kind of alchemizing it and transmuting it into enlightenment of self. Could I have set it up for like something to help my bank account? Yes. But you know it's going to get me a lot further understanding the depths of myself. So when you're setting up protections to transmute into something that you want, yes, if somebody's attacking your business, you have full rights to ask for that to be transmuted into abundance. You got to be really careful. There's a fine line to walk because you can get into things like it's not necessarily like curses or anything like that, but unless you're like a seasoned practitioner of magic or you consider yourself a witch, or you have the correct guidance, you never want to take from someone else. So, for instance, I have a couple neighbors that definitely go around chit-chatting a little too often about my family and I. And I went to my friend Ryan, who I trust wholeheartedly with a lot of things, and he helps me to do some working sometimes, and he's incredibly good at it. But the first thing I said to him was like, okay, they are going around and they're talking about our financial success to the neighbors. And so I was like, so I want to set something up where when they say negative things, it's taking abundance from them and then it's siphoning it into my bank account. Then I sat with it and I was like, I don't feel right. Let's not do that. So as you're using alchemy and transmutations, be mindful of what you're doing. And unless you feel comfortable doing that. So it was an innate reaction where I was like, F them, fuck their opinions, fuck what they're saying about us. So it was a judgment that I made out of anger. And when you're doing things like that, you really need to sit back and consider why you're doing the things that you're doing and seeing how they could possibly affect the people that are doing it to you. And is it necessary to hit them hard, right? Is it necessary for me to go and hit them in the bank account when I know they have a family themselves? they don't make as much money, and so it could be really detrimental to their life. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm not going to go and do that. So what I've done is just kind of set up a ward or a protection against them to just deflect it back. I'm just deflecting back whatever they say. Now they have to sit with those thoughts and why they're thinking about them, and oftentimes they deflect it and they absorb it as like self-doubt, right? So there's that. The thing with sigil protections, what you want to do is research a little bit on sigil rituals and how to set those up for yourself. So it was actually one of the first things that I did, and I learned how to protect myself. So you go in, you do the ritual, you figure out how to do it. It's very easy to research. It's not hard at all. You can always double check with a seasoned practitioner of magic, and they were willing to help you. There's a couple good ones. And if you guys need any recommendations, write it in the comments and I'll contact you through DM, and I'll send you their way. But you would set those sigils up. And then the sigils are something that are not just in your physical practice, not just in your light body, but they're across dimensions. You can set them up through all the dimensions there are. And so it's something that's very personal to you. So what I will do then is I have my protection up for my home. And when I'm cleansing my front porch during the seasons or whenever it needs cleansing, what I do is I take a selenite stick and then I'll write that sigil on my front porch, and that helps me feel protected. I also will do that for myself, or anytime that I go into like more of a ritual with a member of my team. There are certain symbols, like if you're working with your team, I can speak for the few demons that I work with. Their sigils, if you don't know them and you don't want to research them, and it's a really good way to test your discernment, is to, while you're in meditation with them, ask them to show you their sigil and they'll show you. And then you could draw it really quick and then do a quick research on it. And that's really fun. I'll use like a couple different sigils for protections with my team, and they've offered those things to me. So I don't ever do it without the permission of them as well.
One of the things that I've done when I know that I'm going to be like in a deep like channeling session, or when I'm not going to be like fully present, I'll set up a crystal grid around myself. And that's something I like to do. I have specific crystals that I put in specific directions. It's like a physical way for me to like set up what I already have energetically. Because I'm not fully always present, I know that my area um, is protected.
I'd say one interesting thing about meditation protection for me, I don't really do it. Now, I'm sitting here and being like, what the heck? I think my discernment's my protection in my meditation, to be honest. Now that I'm reflecting on that, my discernment is a layer of protection. Okay, my team's validating that because when I'm meditating, if I don't have an intention, I just kind of open myself up. Now, I'm doing that as like a very I would say experienced meditator. I did not do that at the beginning. I'm just sharing that I want to share. Do not just like open yourself up unless you feel like you have good protections as a whole. I don't feel like I do additional protections in meditation because I want to be kind of open and intentional with it. But one thing that I did do when I started like entering sacred space in my room is I put like the protective symbol on all my mirrors. That was like the rune protection symbol. Because my mirror started to freak me out when I first started awakening. I was like, these are portals. What's on the other side of that? I'm not sure what's going on here. And then Odin started coming through for me really strongly in the beginning of my awakening. I'm like, I must use a rune. So then I researched the runes and I was like, this one's protection. And then I just used like incense what ash and just like I didn't really know what I was doing and it was effective. So even if you feel like you don't have a lot of tools or a lot of knowledge, research is your friend, but sometimes you really don't need all the extra fun stuff either.
I love that you talked about that, because one of the things that's come up reading with you and me is that I can actually be too protected. So I'm like overly protected, so I'm not getting really half of the information from my team that I could be getting. So that's also something to think about. Like and Brittany's talked about that as well, as being like mindful and intentional with the protections that you're setting, because if you're not, you can tend to be overly protected, or or not protected enough. But I know that I've run into a lot of times where I am too protected.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to have, right? I think when you're going about these things, and obviously this whole episode is on protections, right? So this it doesn't mean that like if you're not doing any of these things, you're already not intuitively doing them without knowing, or your team. A lot of the times people, it can be something, if you don't have all the tools, if you don't find it necessary to have all the tools, you can literally just ask your team. You can ask your angels, you can ask your ancestors, you can ask your higher self. You could have absolutely nothing, not a single thing to your name, and you could still be very well protected. So don't think that you need all of these spiritual tools to protect yourself in the way that you need to be, because a lot of the times your team is already doing it for you. But you do need to remember that your team has to have constant permission. And this is something that I'm really guilty of, is that I just naturally assume like Lucifer, him being my, I guess, considered my patron of my practice, I just naturally assume like, hey, you're supposed to keep me protected. Like, what the heck is going on? And it's like, no, like it's an energetic exchange, and it's a constant energetic exchange. He's not going to do for me if I'm not doing for him, right? Because that is the relationship that we have. There's that co-evolution that we're working on together. So with that, I always need to, if I feel, it goes back to the hygiene thing, like go back into meditation. You can even set a specific day up every week, like on a Monday, in your waking time, you call yourself back into your body, cleansed, protected. Go to your team really quick and say, hey guys, just wanted to let you know I still needed protection from such and such, or I appreciate the protection you've given me. Can we please continue this? Or if you're feeling a little bit more vulnerable, I really appreciate the protections you've given me. Can we please up it a little bit this week, because I'm feeling such and such with the energies that are around. But constant communication with your team to give them, one, permission, two, it's going to give you a little bit of like ease within yourself, knowing that you're keeping up on the hygiene and stuff. And there are going to be things that slip through the cracks. Don't get me wrong. They will slip through the crack, because divinity, they don't always know everything, contrary to our beliefs. Things do slip. It doesn't mean that your protections haven't worked. It just means it's just something that does happen. Nobody is 100% protected at all times. Nobody, not even the most magical of magical people on this face of the planet. Even divinity themselves have to, I'm sure, use protections. Keep that in mind moving forward with how you're setting up your protections for yourself and with your team, or just ancestors, whatever you use. Leave room for error, leave room for yourself to learn. Let it be a learning process and what works well for you, because things that work for me don't necessarily work for Nicole, or don't necessarily work for Ash. Like, if they don't work with the entities that I work with, you're not just going to go and call in Lucifer and be like, so Brittany said that you help protect her. Can you protect me? Like, it doesn't work that way. I'm not going to go to the dragons, and I'm not going to go to Toth. I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go to them and be like, hey, Ash said that you're really great, or Nicole said, you're pretty badass. So what's up? Like, you got to lean into what your intuition is telling you. And it's a really beautiful way to get to know your team as well.
I think one other thing too is that like it doesn't need to be some long drawn out process for people. Sometimes when we talk about the things that we do, it may seem like, oh, well, I don't always have the time for that, or that could be really time consuming. And it really all depends. Sometimes I'll just be like running out real quick and I'm like, let me just throw up my protections. And that literally will just be a visualization of something that I've set. And that takes all of 2 seconds. Or if I'm wanting to do something more in depth and sit with it a little bit more, then it could look like something completely different. So I think that's something too to think about, is that, it doesn't have to always be something that takes a chunk of time and energy. It really is just that intention.
I think a really cool aspect of us as humans is we love relationships in a way. Like, our human experience is very much based on connection with others and with ourselves. And I think that's fascinating when it comes to protections, because some of your ancestors are really badass, like really badass. Some of yours need a little healing. It's okay. We love duality. But some of your ancestors are very good at protecting you as well. And they honestly, a lot of the time, don't really need your consent and permission for that. So just tune in with your ancestors and you'll know if that resonates for you. And then there's the aspect of the collective energy and how we're all connected on some standpoint. And some of you would benefit from having protections from collective energy just due to how your gifts work. So that's something to also think about. And then another thing that was coming to mind for me is protections of the home. As you have auric layers, your home has spiritual layers, and your protections can be infused in your home as well, or they can look a little different. I've had people's guides suggest that they literally bury crystals at the east, north, south, west grid of their home. I've had people's guides tell me to tell them to literally plant a tree in a place that they needed a little extra protection in. I've had some people's guides tell me that they really needed to go out and cleanse and protect the land because of what had happened before there. So if you feel like you're in a home that feels very vulnerable, a lot of negative energy is able to just continue to come in. The first step is cleansing, which you refer to our last podcast for that insight on that. And then the next step is the protection. You do not want to protect before cleansing, because if you protect before, this is powerful because my throat chakra will kind of glitch sometimes when I'm about to say something important. So here we go. You want to make sure you're cleansing before you're protecting, because if you protect before you cleanse, you will keep in what was not cleansed and potentially not protected before you put the protections in. Hopefully that made sense. So essentially, if you feel like you're icky and you're going to step in the shower, you're not going to shower just your outer layer. You're going to get in all the corners and make sure everything's cleansed and good to go, and then really have a good shower.
Perfect. Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the multi layered thing with protections is start with your basics, cleanse, then banish if you need to. Then you go into your protections, right? And remember that your protections can be multi-layered as well. You can use things like like an energy force around you. You can also, on top of that, use a ward. So there's multiple layers that you can do. Again, write it down just so that you know, because there are a lot of things that you can protect against. Protect your, anybody that comes into your house, protect your children, all those kinds of things. They're really important. So there is a lot of layers to it. But also, when you're doing these things, we always talk about intention, right? Have fun while you're doing with them. If you're infusing a ward, enjoy what you're doing. If it doesn't sit with you and you don't like doing it, then don't freaking do it. If you're trying to sit there and figure out a sigil for yourself and you're like, this is fucking stupid, I hate everything about this, then don't fucking do it. Like, do the things that feel good for you. We're giving you the ideas, we're giving you the foundation of just one thing that you can pick and then see intuitively where things go from there. You don't need to protect yourself from, like, I don't know. I think people who are sensitive energetically, maybe we do, but like if I'm going into the store, I don't need to freaking put a veil in my head. I can just be like, hey, like I don't even need to really necessarily think about walking into a store. But if I am going to a bigger event where I know there's going to be a lot of energy, or if they're, for me myself, like if people are drinking, I know there's going to be a lot of alcohol around me. I don't like that vibe. I don't like that energy. So I will set up energetic protection to where I'm not actually affected by it. I actually went to a bachelorette party for my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sister-in-law. And of course, as people do, they get shit-faced. And it was such a good time. And I remember at one point during the night, like people were getting a little crazy. And I was like, ooh, this is sitting really icky in my stomach. I really didn't like the way it made me feel. So I like went and I just did like an energetic check-in, and I was like, why am I feeling like this? And then I realized that I was absorbing what they were going through. So I was feeling the feelings of being drunk, because that's how my freaking abilities work. I wish I knew how to control that, but I don't. And so I was like, I don't like that I'm feeling like I'm drunk and I haven't drank and I'm a sober person. And so then what I did was I just like sat for a second and I almost like a sonic boom pushed out the energy. And then I imagined myself kind of like what Nicole was saying, but it was a white light, just like a white light of protection around me. And then I was like, okay, like I felt a little bit better. I went and I took a little short, quick little walk to kind of catch my breath and recenter myself. And then I came back to, and I was able to finish out the night and I had so much fun. And it was such a good time. Simple things like that. If you're feeling uncomfortable, figure out why, and then do what you need to protect yourself against those things.
I'm really glad that you talked about that, like that in real time, how to do something that way, because you're probably just sitting there looking like you're having a good time. Then you were able to like take care of it, take care of yourself, even while still being in that outside space. It wasn't like you went and like locked yourself in a room, and that comes with practice. That comes with like again feeling comfortable enough within yourself to know, what to do and how you're feeling and why you're feeling. And it is something that just happens over time and with practice. Sometimes we don't always think like, oh, it's that I need protection or I need to cleanse or that it's something outside of self or even something like within self. Sometimes things come up for me and I always want to look like outside of self, but I forget to look inside and like see what's going on with me and why it's affecting me that way. Um, so that's another good thing like to think about like when you're cleansing and then doing the protection as well.
Another way, sorry, I have a couple other things that popped up for me. I did not realize I was going to have so much to talk about. I honestly didn't. I was like, I'm not that protected. But all these things are kind of coming up. We were talking about veils because that's something you can wear, right? People will wear crystals, right? Like Ash was talking about, she would wear her crystal necklace. You can wear things like that, and you can actually like an amulet. Like you can infuse an amulet with protection. And so you would go out to a store and you would find whatever it is, whatever stone calls to you, whether it's a diamond, a pearl, a rose quartz, whatever you're feeling called to, go buy it if you can, and then just sit with it, meditate with it, ask it for protection, and then wear that thing. So a lot of people, here's a really, really great example of this. You know what a really great example of protection is? People wear the cross around their neck. That's for protection. They feel divinely protected from God or Jesus or whoever. Like I remember growing up, my dad always, and it was funny because he wasn't a religious guy, but he always had his cross on. He couldn't leave the house without his cross. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't understand why, because he was never a religious person. But I think it just made him feel better. I think it made him feel protected, like he was protected by God or something when he's out in the world. So those types of things really make a difference. For myself, I wear, sigils are a big thing in my practice. So I wear my necklace with Lucifer's sigil on it and King Belial's sigil on it. And I do feel naked without it. If I walk out of my house and I don't have my necklaces on, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's just a tangible thing for me to be able to be like, okay, I feel a little bit better, like knowing that there's a piece of them that is with me and I could face the world feeling a little bit more confident or whatever it is. Another really cool thing that you can do, it's kind of cute and it's a little bit more witchy, and I love it. It's a little pocket satchel where you take like protective herbs and you can just have it in your pocket. Or another one that I really like to do is I'll do protective herbs in my wallet so that I'm not spending money that I shouldn't be spending, which maybe I need to redo that because I've been spending money like an idiot lately. But
I need some of
there's
that.
yeah, there's cute little things that you can do like that where it's like it's just such a fun way to make life just a little bit more magical and enjoyable. And it doesn't always have to be like, I'm gonna die. Like you have to you could protect yourself from yourself with your credit cards. You can even do a sigil for your credit cards and just tape it to the back of your credit card if you're trying to save money. You can do things like when I'm cleaning my mirrors, Ash said she, had to kind of lock her mirrors. When I'm washing my windows and I'm washing my mirrors during my cleaning, I always do a sigil over that, or I'll set the intention of like, nothing's allowed to come in without my permission or whatever it is. I like doing crystals around every door, every window, but that is something that's like not everybody has the access to those things. So you can do something like you can make your own black salt, which is another salt is very protective. It's also very cleansing. So that's a 2-in-1 for you. You can make a little black salt, burn a little incense, put the incense ash into the black salt, line your windows, line your doorways. Um, there's a lot that you can do, little things, and you do not have to do them all.
In my research of protection and just thinking about like kind of like affirmations, because we like to give affirmations when the time is right for that. All of the energy when it comes to protections, the way people were affirming it was because of safety. So a big part of feeling protected is feeling safe. that made me really think to suggest really checking out your root center for protection, because that's where we in our light body feel safety a lot of the time. And if your root center is not feeling balanced or feeling protected, your safety meter might be a little off of its equilibrium, even if you are protected. So you might not feel safe or feel protected, even if you are. And a big part of this happened to me. I went through this part of my life where I was like, am I protected? What is happening? Am I getting possessed? What am I tuning into? What are all these weird things? I don't want to do this wrong. And I think at the beginning of our journey, when we open ourselves up to all these energies, that can be a fear for people. I'm opening myself up to all these things, and due to potential societal programming or religious programming, there's added fear in these spaces, right? So kind of think to yourself, like, what does it mean to feel safe to you? And whatever the answer to that is, that can also be your protection.
I love that you brought that up, Ash. It made me think about that time that I had a reading with you and we discovered a reason why I was feeling like so unsafe going into like deep meditations. I think that's also like something that's just really a really cool aspect of it is that sometimes there's a whole reason that we could never know, but we discover, over time and through the help of somebody. Like I never would have been able to pinpoint what was going on without Ash's assistance. And it's been integral now that I know that in how I move forward. And it's just something that it seems so minor, but it's so influential and beneficial.
A lot of the things are necessary to go through as lessons in our life. So let's not forget that just in our day-to-day lives or in our spiritual practices, things, as I mentioned before, will slip through. But if these are lessons in your life where you need to have not just protections, but boundaries are so incredibly important. They go hand in hand with protections, essentially the same thing. But as you're doing these things and as things are coming up for you and you're experiencing the world around you and the connections that you're making to the people, ask for the proper guidance from yourself and from your team to be fully immersed in yourself to understand where these things come from. If you meet a person and initially you meet them and you're like, ooh, you give me a icky feeling, talk to yourself, with yourself in meditation and look at it in the sense of, is there something rotten about this person that I don't like? Or is this something that this person has shown me that I don't like? Or do I just not like them because there's something of myself that I see in them? That kind of goes back to our previous episode of like discernment, where we talk about these things. But it's also important to keep yourself on track with understanding that these people that you meet in your life or the experiences you have are there for a reason. And so as you're going through your practice and you're expanding within your practice, just know that things are going to happen. Things are going to slip through the cracks. Not everything can be chalked up to people giving you evil eye. It's actually quite, I don't know, maybe for somebody like Ash, who's she has a bigger following and stuff, it's probably more common for her than it would be for someone like me. So it's like, I can't, every time, a little hiccup comes into my life, like my dog needs to be taken to the vet, I can't be like, oh my God, somebody cursed my dog. Or anytime I get sick, I can't be like, oh, well, I'm sick because somebody was talking shit about me. So really sit and see where that comes from and understand why you're putting up the protections that you're putting. And then as you're setting up these protections, look at yourself. Really look at yourself. And what I mean by that is, why do you feel it's so necessary to be protected from so many things? Is it something that you've been taught? Is it something that you've experienced? Is there healing within that? Because a lot of the times there is. That's also a thing that I've learned of recent. It's like when I don't like somebody or I get an icky feeling from them, it's typically because they're mirroring something back at me that I don't like about myself. And so I naturally protect myself against them, where I'm like, ooh, I don't like you. I don't like your energy. Stay the hell away from me. And then I find it repeating in my life. And I'm like, oh, there's a lesson there. There's a lesson there I'm missing. And so what I'll do is I'll try to get to know the person a little bit better. I'll find who they are and what their character is like as a actual human being, rather than me just constantly trying to be protected against everybody. And then there's typically healing in that process as well. Sometimes you'll just come across people that are shit and you know it, and up your protections. Fucking send whatever at them that you can. Like, if you're ever, you know what I mean? Like, I have that especially around my child. I'm hypersensitive when my child is around, where I could feel your shit coming from miles away. It's just how I am. And that's how I want to perceive, energy that's around me, because it is my job as her mom to protect her. Right. So see where those energies are coming from. Take a moment to reflect. If you feel like it is completely necessary, then set up those protections. Nicole was talking about being overly protected. I think that in our society and how scary life is right now for a lot of people, we do want to protect ourselves from a lot of things. But there's a lot of lessons to learn in just experiencing those things that we do need to be protected from, right?
Now's the time that we're going to share a protection affirmation to you guys. And the one that best felt like it fit the whole podcast entirely was, it is safe to be here. It is safe to be me. I am safe and protected at all times. It is safe to be here, and it is safe to be me. I am safe and protected at all times.
I love that. I felt that. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode and expanding within conscious conversations. We now close this sacred space with love and gratitude. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected.